In the middle of a junkyard in Toledo, Ohio, transport tycoon Nathan Cole was tied up in the open trunk of a black sedan, tape over his mouth, rope tied across his chest, eyes begging for air. The most terrifying thing wasn't the kidnapping itself. It was the feeling that he'd been discarded like trash. And then Ava Bennett, a poor girl from the trailers at the back of the yard, stopped right in front of him. Nathan tried to speak, but his voice died the moment he saw her face, because there was one detail there that made no sense at all and changed everything. Ava Bennett was 11 and lived in a narrow trailer pushed up against the back fence of a junkyard on the outskirts of Toledo, Ohio. The place smelled like old oil, burned rubber, and rain trapped in rusted metal. By day, the yard turned into a maze of crushed cars, hoods open like mouths, shattered glass glittering on the ground. At night, the wind whistled through twisted frames and made loose signs rattle, like the junkyard itself was breathing. In the middle of all that, Ava was growing up learning to fend for herself, not because she was a hero, but because that's what life had dropped in front of her. Her grandmother, June Bennett, worked there doing the books and watching the cash register for the owner. June had firm hands, tired eyes, and a dry way of showing affection. A plate always full, a shirt stitched back together, a quick, "Take this jacket," tossed over her shoulder. She woke up early, brewed strong coffee, and sent Ava off to school with her hair pulled back however it would cooperate. Ava came home with a backpack lighter than it should have been, because most of the weight she carried wasn't on her shoulders, it was in her head. Even so, she tried not to be a problem. When almost everything is missing, you learn how to take up as little space as possible. But there was one thing about her that never went unnoticed: a wine-colored birthmark covering part of the left side of her face, climbing from her cheek up toward her temple. It didn't hurt. It didn't stop her from running, laughing, or climbing onto stacks of tires. But it was enough to make strangers stare twice, and kids stare 10 times. Sometimes it was the awkward silence, sometimes the blunt question, and on bad days, the mean little laugh that echoed for hours after. Ava pretended not to care, trained a short, controlled smile, and kept going. But she collected every cruel look like little stones in her pockets, not realizing how heavy they were getting. When the world got too tight, she escaped the only way she knew how, drawing with a chewed-up pencil on torn notebook pages, making up stories with whatever she saw around her. A broken headlight became a robot's eye. A ripped seat turned into a throne. A flipped car became a spaceship. The junkyard, which for most people was just a graveyard of metal, was for her a place full of possibilities. Like life had thrown a pile of random pieces on the ground, and she was the only one trying to build something beautiful out of it. If you like stories like that, raw, human, starting from something simple and slowly opening the heart, stick around and subscribe so you don't miss the next ones. That week, a fine drizzle had left everything darker and shinier at the same time. Puddles reflecting gray sky, crushed cans gleaming, the smell of wet dirt mixed with gasoline. June was more tense than usual, making short phone calls and slamming drawers, like she could force the world to stay in place by sheer stubbornness. Ava noticed, but didn't he ask? She'd already learned that some answers only come when they're ready. In the middle of that routine, a new car showed up in the yard. A black sedan, way too nice to be there. And it was right there, next to that too good car, that Ava was about to hear a sound that didn't belong to the junkyard at all. The black sedan had arrived late in the afternoon on the back of a tow truck, and everyone at the yard noticed. It wasn't the kind of car that showed up there in one piece. Paint still shining, tires still good. The yard owner signed a stack of papers. The tow truck pulled away, and that strange body stayed there near the fence, like it had landed in the wrong place. Ava, who always saw beauty where other people saw junk, circled it from a distance, curious, trying to guess why anyone would dump a machine like that here. June barely glanced at it. She was too busy with spreadsheets and a phone that wouldn't stop buzzing. When the sun dropped and the yard started to empty, Ava walked toward the sedan, like you approach a wounded animal. The metal was cold under her fingers, and the air inside didn't smell like an old car. It smelled like leather, cleaning products, and a metallic hint that twisted her stomach. She pressed her hand to the glass, trying to see through the dark tint, and that's when she heard it. At first, it sounded like wind shaking something loose. Then it came again, 3 dull thuds, like someone was punching from the inside, begging for help without being able to make real noise. Ava froze. The junkyard was always noisy, but that sound had intention. Her heart pounding in her throat, she walked around to the back of the car and stopped in front of the trunk. There was no key, of course. The latch wouldn't budge. She pulled, pushed, nothing. "Is someone in there?" She whispered, feeling ridiculous for asking, and at the same time praying she was wrong. The answer came as a muted groan, a heavy, desperate breath, and another thud, weaker this time, like whoever was inside was running out of strength. Ava looked around, saw the long shadows of stacked metal, heard the muffled noise from the office, and thought about running to get June. But her legs didn't move at first. The idea of leaving someone locked in there made her skin crawl. In the tool shed, there was a crowbar leaning in a corner, too big for her hands, but Ava had already learned how to drag heavy things when she had to. She scraped the metal along the ground, the harsh sound echoing through the nearly empty yard, and jammed the tip into the gap of the trunk. Her small hands trembled, but she put her whole weight into it, face scrunched with stubborn effort. The latch creaked once, then again, until the trunk snapped open with a sharp clack that sounded way too loud. Ava jumped back immediately, holding the crowbar out like a weapon, lungs burning. The lid lifted a few inches, and a hot stink of sweat, fear, and blood hit her in the face. Inside, twisted into the smallest space possible, was a grown man, taped and tied, expensive shirt stained, forehead split open, eyes wide from lack of air. It was Nathan Cole, a billionaire business owner, known for running a massive transport company. But in that cramped darkness, he was just another human being who'd spent too long begging to be found. He squinted against the light, confused, and when his gaze finally landed on Ava's face, something shifted. It wasn't normal relief. It was like he'd just seen a ghost, and with a cracked voice, he asked a question that made Ava forget to breathe. Nathan Cole, the man who'd just been dragged out of the trunk, spent a few seconds doing nothing but gulping air, like his lungs had forgotten how to work. The low evening light fell across his sweaty face, the cut on his forehead, the loosened tie that had lost all dignity. He tried to stand, but his legs refused. He slipped sideways, catching himself against the car's frame with a short, swallowed groan of pain and rage. Ava Bennett, the junkyard girl, stepped back on instinct, clutching the crowbar, not as a threat, but like it was the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly turned too strange. When Nathan finally managed to focus, he looked straight at her. First, with the eyes of someone measuring danger, then as someone searching for a way out. But in the next heartbeat, his expression broke. The hard mask cracked like glass. His gaze locked onto the wine-colored mark on the left side of Iva's face, and his throat jerked like he'd just been punched from the inside. No, that's not possible. He muttered more to himself than to her, voice faint. Ava frowned, confused, her stomach twisting, because this man didn't just look scared. He looked shaken in a deeply personal way, as if seeing her had ripped open something old. "What's your name?" Nathan asked carefully, voice slow like he was approaching a wild animal. Ava hesitated. She'd heard her whole life that you don't talk to strangers, especially not in a place like this. But he looked so wrecked that the answer slipped out, almost in a whisper. Ava Bennett. The last name hit him like a silent gunshot. Nathan blinked rapidly, staring at her like that word had finally kicked open a door he'd spent years trying to break down. "Bennett," he repeated, lifting a shaky hand to his mouth for a moment. "And your mom, what was her name?" Ava lowered her eyes. I never knew her. Grandma said she died when I was really little." Nathan closed his eyes and a stubborn tear escaped, cutting through the dust on his face. It wasn't a pretty, controlled tear. It was the quick spill of someone who tried to hold it back and failed. He swallowed hard and said a name like he was stepping onto dangerous ground. Evelyn. My daughter's name was Evelyn. Ava raised her head, not understanding why that name hurt him so much. Nathan drew in a long breath, staring again at the mark on her face, and his voice came out barely there. She had the same mark, in the exact same place. Ava froze. It wasn't the first time someone mentioned her birthmark, but it was the first time anyone spoke about it like proof, not a curiosity or an insult. She took a step back, pure instinct, and Nathan noticed. He raised both hands slowly, making sure she could see he wasn't going to move toward her. Hey, I'm not going to hurt you. For God's sake, I'm just trying to understand. He struggled to steady his breathing and asked the question that seemed to suck all the air out of the junkyard. Who's your grandmother? What's her name? Ava bit her lip, like she knew she was handing over something important. June Bennett. Nathan went completely still. His eyes widened, and for a second, he looked smaller than his own pain. June Bennett, he repeated, and the tone wasn't regular surprise. It was recognition. His throat tightened, and he whispered almost unintentionally, No, Ruth. Right at that moment, June, Ava's grandmother, came out of the office with quick steps, complaining that the girl had vanished. But when she saw Nathan standing next to the sedan, dirty, hurt, staring at Ava like his whole life was suddenly in front of him, the color drained from her face. The silence that formed between the three of them wasn't the silence of accident. It was the silence of the past coming back hard, and Nathan had just said a name June hadn't heard out loud in a very long time. June Bennett stepped into the yard with her cell phone in hand and her expression tight with alarm. She'd come ready to scold, but the words died before they reached her mouth when she saw the injured man standing by the black sedan. For a heartbeat, June seemed to lose her breath, like the junkyard had become a stage for something she'd spent a lifetime trying to bury. Ava, still gripping the crowbar, glanced from her grandmother to the man, confused by the fact that they both had the same kind of silence. For a heartbeat, June seemed to lose her breath, like the junkyard had become a stage for something she'd spent a lifetime trying to bury. Ava, still gripping the crowbar, glanced from her grandmother to the man, confused by the fact that they both had the same kind of silence. Not the silence of nothing to say, but the silence of too much to face. And when the man lifted his eyes and rasped, Ruth, June stumbled back like the name had burned her. Nathan tried to steady himself, but the pain in his body showed with every movement. Even so, he couldn't stop looking at Ava, not with the cold curiosity she knew too well, but with a strange mix of awe and grief. June grabbed Ava's arm immediately, pulling the girl behind her like she could block the whole world with her shoulders. You stay here. Don't say another word, she whispered, voice stern but shaking at the end. Nathan drew a ragged breath. I'm not a threat to her. I just need to understand. June shot back. What you need is a hospital. That's when he forced out, voice tight. My name is Nathan Cole, and I know who you are. In the office, the air was warmer, but even heavier. June called 911 with clumsy fingers, asking for an ambulance and the police, avoiding Nathan's eyes. Ava stayed in the corner, clutching a battered notebook, trying to put the pieces together with an 11-year-old brain. Why did that old name make Grandma shake like that? When Officer Daniels arrived first, followed by the distant wail of sirens, Nathan was already seated, shirt-stained, wrists raw where the ropes had been. The officer asked quick questions, checked the car, wrote everything down. In the middle of it, Nathan pointed at June, not accusing, but firm. She's been with my family for years, and I think I just found someone I lost. June shut her eyes like the word family was a trap. I didn't steal anybody, she said flatly. I raised a child. Nathan swallowed. Then tell me why you disappeared. Tell me why I've been looking for you for years and you never came forward. June clenched her jaw, and for a long second her silence said more than any answer. Finally, she spoke in a thin voice. not looking at Ava. "My name isn't June. Not originally." She turned her face away, as if saying it hurt physically. "I used to be Ruth Bennett." Before everything, Nathan let out a trembling breath, like a nightmare had just been confirmed. "I knew it. I knew it was you." From there, the words started tumbling out like a stuck drawer finally yanked open. June, Ruth, explained that Nathan's daughter Evelyn hadn't vanished out of pure rebellion. She, run away from a father who wanted to control every decision, every boyfriend, every step. On that escape route, she fell in love with Liam Bennett, Ruth's son, a regular guy, hard-working, with no big last name and no luxury. That was exactly what let Evelyn breathe for the first time in years. Ruth spoke about the simple wedding, the attempt at a fresh start, and the constant fear that Nathan would show up with lawyers and security guards, treating feelings like property. Then came the part Ruth shared with wet eyes but no tears. The accident that took Evelyn's life and left a small child behind. She described the confusion afterward, names mixed up, documents lost, and the decision she made, convinced it was what a grandmother does when danger comes with a bank account. She moved to another city, changed routines, even changed her own name, so no one could find Ava before the girl was strong enough to face whatever might come. Now, with Nathan injured in her office and Ava just a few steps away, that protection looked more like a wall cracking from the inside. The officer watched everything with the gaze of someone who understood this was no longer just a kidnapping case. It was an entire past demanding to be heard. When Nathan looked at Ava's birthmark again, his voice came out low, almost pleading. "If I'm right, we're going to need proof." And outside, the sirens grew louder, like the night itself was about to force answers none of them were ready to give. That night, the junkyard in Toledo turned into a scene none of them would have chosen. Patrol cars with flashing lights crowded the gate the ambulance carried, Nathan Cole away, forehead bandaged, wrists marked, and Ava went along with Ruth because no one was going to leave that child alone after everything she'd seen. At the hospital, the smell of antiseptic and old coffee clung to their clothes. Ruth answered the detective's questions in short, plain sentences. No drama, but her hand never left Ava's shoulder, like she was afraid someone might simply pick the girl up and vanish. Nathan, even lying on a gurney, couldn't get Ava's face out of his mind. Not just the mark, but what it meant. The kidnapping case itself started coming together quickly, once Nathan named companies, old threats, grudges, deals gone wrong. Investigators pieced it all together with cold efficiency. The black sedan hadn't ended up in the junkyard by chance. It had been dumped there as disposal, as a warning. A senior detective, Monroe, looked Nathan straight in the eye and said bluntly, "You've got too many enemies and not enough security." Nathan didn't argue, which already said a lot. On the other side, Ruth was taken into a separate room. "Your name isn't June. That complicates things," one officer said. She didn't beg. She just took a deep breath and replied, "I changed it because I was afraid of what his money could do to my granddaughter." For the first time, someone in uniform looked at her without treating her like a criminal, like he understood that not every disappearance comes from malice. The confirmation came in the coldest way possible. Paperwork, signatures, swabs, lab reports. When the DNA result arrived, there was no soundtrack, no poetic line, just silence. Nathan sat in a plastic hallway chair, still pale. Ruth held a paper cup of water that had gone room temperature long ago. The detective explained the basics, matter of fact, then stepped away, leaving the three of them alone for a few seconds, as if he knew this part didn't belong in a file. Nathan looked at Ava carefully, like she was made of glass. I don't even know where to start," he said, voice low. Ava hugged her notebook to her chest and asked, with the simple honesty of a child, "So you're my grandpa?" The word came out crooked, like her mouth wasn't sure she was allowed to say it. Nathan nodded once, slowly, and the emotion hit him harder than the kidnapping ever had. He turned to Ruth and, without asking for sympathy, finally let out what had been stuck inside for years. "I messed things up with my daughter." Ruth didn't sugarcoat it. "You didn't just mess up. You tried to mold her like she was a project." He swallowed, accepting the blow. I thought I was protecting her. I thought control meant love. His hand trembled on his knee. Evelyn looked at me like I was a wall. I only realized it when it was already too late. Ruth said nothing at first, but some of the hardness in her face cracked a little, like even her anger was tired. Nathan turned to Ava, not promising her the world, not waving money around as a cure-all. I'm not going to take your life away from you. I'm not going to separate you from your grandmother. I just want the chance to be around. The right way. Ava looked to Ruth first, searching her grandmother's eyes for permission. Ruth took a slow breath and didn't say yes or no. She just loosened her grip on the girl's shoulder. A tiny gesture that meant everything. Nathan saw it and dropped his head. A wordless thank you. When Ava opened her notebook without thinking, a sheet of paper slipped to the floor. A quick sketch of a woman's face with the same wine-colored mark. Nathan froze again, because in those rough pencil lines, it felt like Evelyn had found a way to speak. And he knew he needed to see more of that world before this second chance slipped away. A few days later, Nathan Cole came back to the junkyard in Toledo on a dull, heavy afternoon. Clouds smeared like lead across the sky, wind making the loose metal sing. Didn't he arrive in a flashy car or with the aura of a man used to being obeyed? He came slowly, body still sore, eyes unfocused, like he was relearning how to walk into places where money doesn't open a single door. Ava was sitting on the trailer steps, knee dirty, worn down pencil in hand, drawing like she was trying to put the world in some kind of order. Ruth watched from a distance, arms crossed, expression hard. Not because she didn't have a heart, but because she'd spent too long using it to shield this child. Ava glanced up and froze when she recognized him. Nathan didn't paste on a smile or launch into some rehearsed speech. "Hey, is it okay if I sit here for a minute?" he asked. Ruth didn't answer right away. Her silence was always a test. Nathan lowered himself onto a cut tree stump nearby anyway, keeping his distance, eyes on the drawing without leaning in. Ava flipped the page, revealing the face of a woman, delicate lines, and on the left side, the same wine-colored mark. Nathan's chest clenched in a way even the kidnapping hadn't managed. "I don't remember her, but it feels like I do," Ava said quietly, as if afraid she was making it up. Ruth tensed, ready to shut the topic down, but Nathan only murmured, "Your mom." Evelyn drew like that, like she was in a hurry to leave something alive behind. The next day, he came back with a simple box, no designer logo, good paper, real colored pencils, a hardcover sketchbook. Ruth's whole body stiffened, ready to refuse a gift with strings. Nathan noticed and spoke before she could. "This doesn't buy anything, doesn't change anything. It's just tools." Ruth narrowed her eyes. "Tools for what?" Nathan took a breath. "For her to have choices. I took too many choices from Evelyn. I won't do that to Ava." There was no polished apology in his words, just a man trying to stand inside his own guilt without running from it. When Ava took the sketchbook, her hands shook a little, like it was too fragile to exist in her world. Ruth watched, suspicious, until she noticed something else in Nathan's bag. An old, worn folder with Evelyn Cole written on it in ink, edges softened by years of being handled like a secret. He didn't open it or shove it at anyone. "If you ever want to see it, I brought some of her drawings. If you don't, I'll take them home," he said. Ruth didn't answer, but for a split second her gaze flickered, and that was enough for Nathan to understand that trust wouldn't come as a big agreement. It would have to be built through one quiet visit at a time. While the wind rattled the carcasses outside, Ava turned to the first blank page, as if their story was about to write itself in a whole new way. In the days that followed, Nathan Cole started showing up at the junkyard, like someone learning how to enter a space without taking it over. No security detail, no requests pretending to be kindness. He'd arrive with coffee for Ruth and a hot chocolate for Ava, then sit wherever they pointed, sometimes on an old crate, sometimes on the trailer step, listening more than he talked. Ruth stayed guarded, but it wasn't the same hard edge of threat anymore. It was the kind of watchfulness that checks, over and over, to see if this rich man is really going to stay without trying to own everything. The first serious conversation between Nathan and Ruth had no hugs and no pretty. I forgive you. It had boundaries. Ruth pointed her finger, blunt. You don't buy her life. And you don't turn her routine upside down because you feel guilty. Nathan swallowed and took the hit. I don't want to run anything, he said quietly. I just want to learn how to be here. Ruth didn't soften, but she finally asked what hurt most. And when you get tired? When this stops feeling like a mission? Nathan stared at the gravel for a long moment. If I walk away, I'll be the same man who lost Evelyn. I'm not willing to be him again. Ava, who? Do you always watch the world through cracks and corners? Notice the little changes before any big declarations. Nathan started treating her drawings as language, not just something to kill time. When she sketched the wrecks in the yard as castles, he didn't laugh. He asked where the door was, where the windows went, who lived there. One day, he brought a folder with copies of Evelyn's old drawings. Nothing fancy, just carefully kept pages, and left it on the table without pushing it toward anyone. Ava opened it slowly and stared at one particular sketch. A little girl with a birthmark, the same mark, drawn with a gentle hand, as if someone had somehow predicted her. Ruth turned away, but without noticing, laid a steady hand on Ava's shoulder. As a sliver of trust formed, it didn't show up in some grand gesture. It appeared in a simple decision. Ruth allowed Nathan to drive Ava to a community arts center nearby, a small room that smelled like paint and old wood. Ava walked in shy, then forgot her face and just got lost in the colors. Nathan stayed in the back, out of the way. Halfway through class, Ruth showed up unannounced, just to see it with her own eyes. There, as Ava drew among kids who didn't flinch at her mark, Nathan realized this new family wouldn't be built on last names. It would be built on presence. And when the teacher mentioned an upcoming public exhibit at a local college, Ava had no idea she was about to say something out loud she'd kept buried her entire life. The years that followed passed quietly, the way time moves when nobody's trying to fix life by force. Ava Bennett, Nathan's granddaughter, grew up between the simple trailer and classrooms that smelled like paint and paper, always with Ruth close by, firm, protective, but less armored now. Nathan became a real fixture in their lives, showing up for school shows, grabbing Ava when it rained, sitting in the back row instead of demanding attention. Slowly, that wine-colored mark that once felt like a cruel spotlight turned into a signature. Ava started drawing faces with scars, marks, and differences, and she did it with tenderness, as if giving each one a safe place to exist on the page. When Ava launched an art project for teens with visible marks, there was no glitzy gala, no brass plaque. There was a borrowed room at a community center, scratched tables, boxes of pencils, and kids slipping in with their shoulders tense. Ruth helped organize in her own way, and Nathan quietly paid for what was needed without turning it into a spectacle. A boy with vitiligo asked if the workshop was to learn how to hide it. Ava answered without thinking, no, it's so you can learn how to look back. Ruth heard that from across the room and swallowed hard, like the sentence had cut through decades. Nathan stood at the doorway, chest tight, realizing the most valuable thing he'd ever helped build couldn't be measured in stock or profits. Graduation came on a warm night in an auditorium at the University of Toledo, buzzing with that mix of pride and nerves. Ava, now a young woman, walked onto the stage in her cap and gown, diploma waiting in some envelope off to the side. Her birthmark still there, exactly the same, but her gaze completely different. In the audience, Ruth gripped her purse like it was the only thing keeping her grounded, still half unable to believe that the little girl from the junkyard was up there. Beside her, Nathan tried to hold himself together, eyes shining. When Ava took the microphone, silence spread quickly, as if everyone sensed this was more than a standard speech. She talked about family without sugarcoating, about absence without turning it into an attack. She spoke about her mark, the way you talk about a scar that has stopped being an open wound. She said she'd grown up believing she carried a flaw stamped across her face, until she realized it was also a map, a reminder of where she came from, and of the people who stayed when walking away would have been easier. Ruth bowed her head, because there was forgiveness in those words, even though it was never spoken directly. Nathan drew in a shaky breath, feeling both the weight of what he'd lost and the rare gift of seeing something new bloom in its place. And when Ava finished before leaving the stage, she looked straight at the two of them, as if there was still one last sentence, the one that didn't belong in the microphone, but that would change the way that night was remembered forever. That night didn't end with an easy, movie-style happy ending or some huge promise. It ended with Nathan Cole learning, for the first time, how to stay, not as the owner of anything, but as a man who finally understood the weight of simply being there. Ava didn't get rid of the mark on her face. She stopped losing her peace because of it. And Ruth, who'd spent years holding the world up with both hands, realized that protecting sometimes means stepping back and letting life happen when the right person shows up in the right way. Nathan's money helped, of course. It opened doors, paid for supplies, brought some comfort. But what truly changed everything was something else. The day he stopped trying to control and started to respect. In the end, the most important justice wasn't the one in a courtroom or on the news. It was the rare kind. A man facing his own guilt, swallowing his pride, and choosing to love without demanding a receipt in return. And you, if you were in Ruth's place, would you have hidden that child to protect her? Or told the truth and faced the risk? And if you were in Nathan's shoes, would you have the courage to accept that some mistakes bound to get fixed with a check, only with who you become afterward? Tell me in the comments which part of this story hit you the hardest. I really do read what you write. If this story moved you, tap like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Because around here, we don't just talk about wealth. We talk about everything it can't buy.